There comes a moment in every life when the noise becomes too loud, the doubts become too heavy, and the path feels too dark to walk alone. And it's usually at that moment that something unseen steps in and guides you where you need to be. That's why you're here. You were led, not lost. You were guided, not forgotten. And as we begin this time together, I want you to feel how close God has been to you, even in the moments you believed He had stepped away. In our time together today, I'm going to help you understand why you were guided here and what that guidance really means for your life. I'm going to speak to the part of you that has been tired, the part that has been worried, the part that has been trying to carry everything alone. I'll show you how to feel God's presence in a real and simple way, not as an idea you try to believe, but as a truth you can feel moving inside you. By the end of this, you'll understand why your hardest moments didn't break you, why your delays were not punishments, and why your path has been held and supported by something far greater than fear. I know how easy it is to believe that God has stepped away, especially when life feels heavy or uncertain, when doors close, when people leave, when the old ways stop working. Most of us are taught to look for signs in the sky, when the truth is that the greatest guidance is the quiet pull inside us, the small moments of clarity, the gentle nudges that feel like sudden knowing. And the reason this matters is simple. When you can feel that guidance, when you trust it, even a little, your whole life begins to open in ways you never imagined. You stop chasing, you stop forcing, you begin allowing, and in that allowing, everything starts to shift. And so, in this message, we're going to walk through the quiet places inside you where God has been waiting to meet you again. I'll talk about the moments that feel like mistakes but are really movements of grace. I'll talk about the people who came and went and why their timing was perfect even when it felt painful. I'll talk about the delays that frustrated you, the dreams that felt slow to arrive, and how every one of them was guided with more love than you've ever known. And I'll open a few doors you may not have considered, doors that will help you understand why you were brought here right now and why this moment in your life is more important than you realize. There are truths ahead that will shift the way you see your past and the way you step into your future. And before we finish, something inside you will settle, something will soften, and something will rise. There's something I want to ease you into gently. Something that sits at the center of everything we're about to explore together. And it begins with a simple understanding that most people move past far too quickly. After the opening moments of this journey, when your heart softened just enough to feel the truth that brought you here, there is a natural next step, a deepening, a settling into an awareness that changes the whole way you see your life. And here's what most people miss. They look for God outside of themselves, somewhere far away, somewhere high above, somewhere separate, when the real truth is that God has never been separate from you at all. He's never been distant, never been gone, never been missing. The only thing that ever goes missing is our own awareness of Him. The quiet inner turning that reminds us He has been with us from the very first breath we've taken. So before we go any further, I want to sit with you inside this idea, because it isn't a theory and it isn't a beautiful thought you repeat to feel better. It's the reality of your existence. And understanding it is like opening a door you didn't even know was locked. The value in this moment is simple. When you understand that God has been with you at every single step, the guilt begins to fall away, the fear begins to loosen, and the heaviness that's been following you softens. You begin to see your life not as a series of broken pieces, but as a guided unfolding. And that shift, that small inner turning, is the beginning of a new awareness and the beginning of feeling God, not as a belief you try to hold, but as a presence that holds you. Now here's what changed everything for me. I realized that you only feel abandoned when you drift away from the quiet space inside you. It isn't God who steps back. It's the noise, the rushing, the old wounds, the fears, the stories, the voices from the world that drown out the soft sound of God's presence. That presence is like your breath. You don't think about it all day long, but it's always there, steady and faithful, feeding your life without asking for any attention. And God moves that way too. Even when you're unaware, He's the force carrying you through the seasons. Even when you doubt, He's the silence beneath the doubt. And the moment you return to that still place inside you, even for a breath, you return to Him instantly, because He never left you in the first place. When I was a boy, standing in moments that felt much too heavy for a child to hold, I can remember sensing something larger than the world in front of me, something comforting and spacious and steady. I didn't have the language for it, and I didn't need it. It was enough to feel. And as I grew older, I realized that this presence had been with me all along, in the same way the sun is always behind the clouds. Clouds don't dim the sun. They only dim your view of it. And so it is with God. Your pain doesn't make Him leave. Your confusion doesn't make Him disappear. Your fear doesn't push Him away. It only makes it harder for you to notice what's already here. What I want to do with you in these moments is help you feel that presence again, not as a memory or an idea, but as a living truth that's breathing through you right now. Because once you begin to recognize that God isn't out there somewhere, but right here within you, you start to feel held. You start to feel guided. You start to feel less alone in the story of your life. And that simple shift becomes the ground on which every other truth in this journey will stand. And as you let that truth settle deeper into you, something beautiful begins to happen. Something subtle but powerful. Because all at once, you begin to realize that the presence you've been searching for has been carrying you all along. What I'm about to share next might seem almost too simple at first, yet it holds the key to so much of the suffering we experience. Because if you understand this, truly understand it, your relationship with yourself, with your past, with your fear, and with God begins to soften in ways you may not have believed possible. For most of our lives, we're taught that we're separate, that we're cut off, that we're alone in a world that moves without noticing us. We're taught that God is somewhere above us, somewhere far away, somewhere we must reach or earn or chase. And because of that misunderstanding, we spend years, sometimes decades, thinking we're walking through life without support. But the real truth is far gentler. The real truth is that you've never once been alone, not even in the darkest hours or the longest nights or the moments you believed you were forgotten. The feeling of being alone is not proof of separation. It's only proof that the mind has forgotten its source. And here's where things begin to shift. Most of what we call being alone is nothing more than the ego interpreting your challenges through fear. When something unexpected happens, the ego says, "You see, this shouldn't have happened. You're abandoned. You're on your own." But the spirit within you, the quiet voice of God that never raises itself, whispers something completely different. It says you're growing, you're being shaped, you're being guided toward a deeper awareness. The ego shouts its fear. God speaks in a whisper. And because the world teaches us to respond to what's loud and urgent, we tune into fear long before we remember to listen for the stillness beneath it. I often compare it to a radio signal that is always broadcasting. Think of this. Right now, in the air around you, countless stations are playing music, conversations, voices, messages. They don't stop broadcasting just because you're not tuned in. They're all there, right now. But until you turn the dial to the correct frequency, you don't hear any of it. God is the same way. His presence, His guidance, His love, these things never stop flowing. What happens is simply that your attention gets tuned to the wrong frequency. You become tuned to stress, to fear, to memory, to comparison, to worry. And those frequencies drown out the gentle signal of God that is always, always being transmitted into your life. When we talk about the illusion of separation, that's exactly what we mean. It's an illusion created by the noisy mind, by the beliefs you were handed before you even knew you had a choice, by the wounds you carried from years you barely remember. You were taught to live from the outside in, responding to events and people and expectations, instead of returning to the quiet place within you where God lives. Feeling alone doesn't mean God stepped away. It means the mind stepped in and covered the truth for a moment. And when you learn how to quiet that noise, even for a breath, God becomes unmistakable again. Let me take you deeper into this with something very simple. Imagine a person standing by the ocean. The waves rise and fall, crash and calm, but no matter what the waves are doing, the ocean itself never stops being the ocean. Now, imagine the wave believing it is separate, believing it has no connection to the vastness from which it rises. That wave might think it is alone, isolated, struggling to maintain shape against the forces around it. But if the wave could remember even for a moment that it is made of the ocean, sustained by the ocean, and inseparable from the ocean, its fear would dissolve instantly. You and God are like that. You are not a separate thing trying to survive in a world that doesn't see you. You are an expression of the very force that created you. You rise out of God, you move through God, and you return again and again to God, not because you must earn your way back, but because you never left in the first place. And I want you to feel this, not think it, because it's the feeling that matters. When you understand that separation was never real, something inside your chest loosens. You breathe differently. You stand differently. Your heart stops racing as often. Your thoughts slow down. You are no longer running away from life or towards something outside of yourself. You begin to rest in the awareness that you are held from the inside, and that awareness becomes the bridge between the anxious mind and the peaceful soul. As we move deeper into this journey together, I want you to hold this simple truth close. God is experienced when the ego quiets. Every spiritual tradition, every teacher, every mystic has said this in their own way, because it is the universal truth running beneath every path. God is not loud because he doesn't need to be. Love doesn't shout. Truth doesn't demand attention. Presence doesn't push. God waits in the quiet space within you, and the moment you turn inward, even slightly, his nearness becomes overwhelming. And that nearness, that closeness, that gentle sense that something larger is holding you becomes the foundation on which your entire life begins to transform. What I want to open for you now is a deeper layer of this truth. Because once you understand that separation is only an illusion, the natural next step is learning how to return to the place within you where God has always lived, even when you forgot how to listen. And here's something most people never realize. The journey back to God is not a journey of distance. It isn't about climbing, striving, reaching, or accomplishing. It isn't something you earn through effort or discipline. It's something you remember through stillness, because God speaks in silence, and silence is the doorway to the presence you've been yearning for, even when you didn't know what you were seeking. The moment you turn inward, even for a breath, even for a half second of surrender, something opens, something softens, something ancient within you wakes up and recognizes its source. I've always said that silence is God's native language, and everything else is an attempt to translate it. You see, the mind loves noise. It fills your day with commentary, with judgments, with old stories, with worries that never seem to run out of fuel. But beneath all of that noise, beneath all the layers of thought and fear and memory, there is a space that has never been touched by any of it. That space is where God dwells. It's where your peace lives. It's where your deepest wisdom waits for you to stop long enough to hear it. And when you learn to enter that silence, when you learn to make room for even a moment of stillness, you discover something remarkable. You discover that God isn't far. He's not hidden. He's not difficult to find. He's simply quiet. And because the world has grown so loud, we forget how to listen. Think of the ocean again, because it's such a gentle way to understand this. Imagine a wave crashing over itself during a storm. The surface is chaotic, violent, unpredictable. But if you travel even a little beneath that surface, the water grows calm. And if you go deeper still, it becomes completely still, completely unbothered by what's happening above. That stillness has always been there. It doesn't need to be created. It doesn't need to be earned. It only needs to be entered. And your inner world works the same way. Your thoughts, your worries, the noise of your daily life, they're the storm on the surface. But beneath them, deeper than anything that disturbs you, there is a stillness that has never been shaken by anything that has ever happened to you. That stillness is where God waits for you with open arms every time you return. And here's what's beautiful about this. Guidance becomes clear the moment you choose stillness. It doesn't require effort. It only requires willingness. When you pause, when you breathe, when you sit quietly long enough to let your mind settle, God's voice rises from the quiet like a gentle light. It doesn't tell you everything at once. It doesn't deliver a roadmap. It simply nudges you toward the next small step, and that step leads to another and another until you look back one day and realize you were guided all along. You weren't stumbling. You weren't lost. You were being led through an inner compass that has always pointed you toward truth, even when you didn't trust it. I remember a moment in my life when everything around me felt uncertain, when the path ahead looked foggy and the choices felt overwhelming, and I did the thing I've always told others to do. I sat down, became quiet, placed my hands open on my lap, and simply listened. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't try to solve anything. I just listened. And in that silence, I felt a pull inside me, a whisper that said, "You are exactly where you need to be. Just take one gentle step forward." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It didn't shake the ground beneath me. It was subtle, almost fragile, like the first note of a song. But that whisper guided every step I took from that moment on. And the same whisper is available to you every single day of your life. You don't have to force it. You don't have to chase it. You simply return to the quiet place within you, the place that remembers God even when the rest of your life feels chaotic or uncertain. And every time you choose that stillness, something inside you grows stronger. Your peace deepens, your clarity sharpens, your fear loosens, and your awareness of God becomes less like a hope and more like a lived reality. And as this awareness grows, as you feel this presence more and more in the quiet space inside you, something beautiful begins to shift in the way you move through the world. You begin to walk with a sense of companionship because you know you're not alone. You begin to see challenges differently because you know they are shaping you, not breaking you. You begin to greet each moment with softer eyes and a gentler heart because you know there is a divine rhythm beneath everything you experience. And when that rhythm becomes clear, even for a moment, your whole life begins to open in ways you never imagined. Now I want to take you even deeper into this experience of connection, because as the mind grows quieter and the heart begins to settle into its natural rhythm, there comes a moment when you start to feel something inside you that doesn't feel like your own thought or your own memory or your own desire. It feels softer than that, quieter than that, more steady and more patient than anything the mind produces. You feel it not as a command but as a gentle pull, not as a demand but as a quiet knowing, not as pressure but as an invitation. And this subtle movement within you is what I call God's whisper. Most people expect guidance to arrive like thunder from the sky, like a voice echoing from the heavens, giving instructions in clear, unmistakable language. But God rarely moves through grand gestures. God guides through gentle nudges, through intuition, through the quiet sense that something is right or something is wrong or something is calling you in a direction you can't explain but can't deny either. And here's the thing that may surprise you. You've already felt this whisper many times. You may have ignored it, doubted it, questioned it, or brushed it aside because it didn't fit with the plans your mind had made, but you felt it. It's that moment when you knew you shouldn't go somewhere and later realized you were protected. It's that sudden urge to call someone and you find they needed your voice. It's the pull toward a choice that doesn't make sense on paper but feels peaceful in your bones. It's the sensation of being guided without logic, held without evidence, supported without proof. And when you learn to trust that whisper, even a little, your life begins to unfold in a way that feels less like struggle and more like grace. I want you to think for a moment about those times in your life when something inside you quietly told you the truth, long before your mind caught up. Maybe it told you to leave a situation that wasn't nurturing you. Maybe it told you to step into something new, even when fear tried to hold you back. Maybe it told you to rest when you thought you had to push, or to forgive when you wanted to hold on, or to trust when everything looked uncertain. That little whisper didn't come from your anxiety or your history or your habits. It came from God guiding you in the only way He ever does, softly, compassionately, lovingly. It's easy to overlook these small movements because the world has trained you to look for signs in the sky, for miracles that break the laws of nature, for loud signals that leave no room for doubt. But the real miracles, the most life-changing guidance, arrive in ordinary moments. They arrive in the way your intuition tugs at you, in the way your heart tightens or opens, in the way peace settles over you when you think about one path and unease rises when you think about another. God isn't trying to overwhelm you. God is trying to lead you. And leadership, when it comes from love, is gentle. This inner whisper is like a compass built into your soul. You don't have to activate it. You don't have to construct it. You don't have to earn it. It's been there from the beginning, pointing you toward your highest path, even when you didn't know you were on a journey. And just like a compass, it doesn't shout. It doesn't debate with you. It doesn't drag you forward. It simply points the way and waits for you to follow. When you do, your life begins to move in harmony. When you ignore it, life becomes heavier, more confusing, more complicated. Not because God is punishing you, but because you're walking against the current instead of with it. I've often felt this whisper in the simplest moments. Moments where I wasn't even asking for guidance. Moments where I was simply present enough to hear something deeper than my thoughts. I remember once walking along a beach in a time of great uncertainty, feeling the weight of choices I wasn't sure how to make, and I paused to watch a bird gliding on the wind. There was no effort in its movement, no struggle, no force. It wasn't trying to control the wind, it was letting the wind carry it. And as I watched, I felt a quiet message rise within me: let yourself be carried. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't solve my problems instantly, but it shifted the energy inside me. It reminded me that I didn't have to push so hard, that I could trust the guidance already moving through my life, that the whisper inside me was wiser than the noise outside me. When you begin to listen for this whisper, you stop searching for answers in all the places that cannot give them. You stop expecting the world to tell you who you are. You stop waiting for others to validate your path. You learn to return again and again to the quiet space inside you where God speaks in the only voice He has ever needed, soft enough that you must become still to hear it. And in that stillness, you will begin to notice that life itself becomes a guided conversation, one that gently pulls you toward the person you're becoming and the life you're now ready to receive. And stay with me, because after this whisper becomes familiar, something even more beautiful begins to unfold. You start to notice God not just in the quiet moments, but in every moment of your life, even the ones that once felt ordinary or insignificant, revealing themselves as sacred once you learn how to see. And now that the whisper within you is becoming clearer, now that you're starting to sense that subtle guidance that has always been present, we can step into a truth that has the power to reshape the entire way you move through your days. Because once you recognize God's presence in the quiet moments, the natural next awakening is realizing that this same presence is woven into every part of your daily life, even the smallest actions, even the moments you once dismissed as insignificant. And here's something that might surprise you. It isn't the grand, dramatic experiences that transform your awareness the most. It's the ordinary ones. It's the mornings when you wake before anyone else and feel a brief moment of peace. It's the way sunlight filters through your window and warms your face. It's the sound of laughter from someone you love. It's the simple act of washing your hands, folding your clothes, preparing your meals, or sitting quietly with a cup of something warm. These everyday moments, the ones you hardly notice, are the very places where God reveals how close He has been all along. You see, when you begin to feel God's presence, when it becomes a lived awareness rather than a distant idea, the world around you starts to glow in a way that's hard to explain. You begin to sense a sacredness in everything. You notice how the breeze feels like a soft reminder of grace. You see how the faces of strangers reflect the same divine spark that lives inside you. You start to observe your experiences not as random events, but as carefully placed invitations to grow, to love, to soften, to return. And in that noticing, life becomes less of a struggle and more of a communion. You move through your days with quieter steps, with gentler eyes, with a heart that wakes up a little more to the miracle of simply being alive. And something else happens too. When you're aware of this presence, challenges don't strike you the same way they once did. They lose their power to overwhelm you. You still feel them, of course, because you're human, but you don't collapse under them. You don't fall into the old story that you're alone or unsupported or forgotten. Instead, you begin to see difficulty as a passage, not a punishment. You begin to understand that whatever rises in your path is something you're strong enough to meet, something designed to grow your awareness, something meant to bring you closer to the truth rather than push you farther away. And that shift, that quiet inner knowing, turns challenges into teachers instead of threats. I remember once watching the sunrise in silence, standing on a quiet stretch of beach with nothing more than the sound of the waves and the cool air moving across my skin. And there was no dramatic revelation, no booming insight, no sudden flashes of wisdom. There was only a simple, steady awareness that everything in that moment was held together by the same force that was holding me. The sun didn't rush. The ocean didn't panic. The world didn't strain to prove its worth. Everything moved with an effortless harmony. A quiet orchestration that reminded me that life doesn't need to be forced to unfold. It unfolds because something sacred is guiding it. And when you start to recognize this sacred rhythm, even in the smallest details, you begin to realize that you too are being guided in every moment of your life. Gratitude becomes something natural, not something you try to practice. It rises on its own. It becomes the natural response to recognizing the divine in everything. You start to be grateful not just for the obvious blessings, but for the difficult moments that shaped you, for the delays that protected you, for the detours that taught you patience, for the losses that opened your heart. Gratitude becomes less of an exercise and more of a way of being, because you're no longer trying to make life different from what it is you're learning, to see it with new eyes. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to walk with God in a way that feels effortless, as if every step you take is supported by something beyond your understanding. You find yourself breathing in rhythm with a presence that has always been there, guiding you, holding you, carrying you through the chapters of your life, even when you didn't know how to carry yourself. This is where transformation begins, not in the dramatic moments, but in the quietly sacred ones that reveal the truth of who you are and who has been walking with you since the very beginning. And once you begin to feel this presence moving with you, something else begins to unfold. You start to understand that every moment had a purpose, and that realization carries us into the next chapter of this journey together. There's something I want to open with you here. Something tender and powerful that begins to rise the moment you start to feel God's presence in your life again. Because as soon as you recognize you've never been alone, the next natural question that stirs inside the heart is this quiet wondering about why you were brought to this exact moment, this exact experience, this exact turning point in your life. And what I'm about to share might feel almost unbelievable at first, yet when you let it move through you, when you sit with it long enough to feel its truth, it starts to make sense of so many chapters of your past. Most people assume their life is a random collection of events, a patchwork of circumstances stitched together by chance. But nothing in your life has ever been random. Not the joys, not the losses, not the delays, not the unexpected turns. Everything in your life has been preparing you for a deeper awakening. And everything has been guiding you toward the moment you're in right now. If you look back honestly, not with judgment, not with regret, but with gentle eyes, you'll see that every struggle you've survived has given you something: strength, compassion, awareness, resilience, clarity. These qualities didn't appear out of thin air. They were formed, shaped, and stretched into you by the very experiences you once wished would go away. Life has a way of building spiritual muscles long before you realize you'll need them. And while the mind resists the struggle, the soul understands its purpose. It knows that every challenge carries a lesson, every detour carries protection, and every unanswered longing carries direction. I've always loved the image of a seed hidden underground, completely unseen, completely covered in darkness. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening at all. It looks lifeless, still, forgotten. But beneath the surface, something incredible is taking place. The seed is preparing. It's strengthening. It's forming roots. It's building the foundation required to push through the soil when the time is right. And if you were to judge the seed during its underground stage, you might call it delayed or stuck or lifeless. But if you understood the process, you would realize that the darkness was not the end, it was the beginning. And your life has worked the same way. Those periods of waiting, the stretches of loneliness, the phases where it felt like nothing was happening, they were never signs of abandonment, they were signs of preparation. They were the divine setup for the chapters you're ready to live now. Your delays weren't punishment, they were timing, they were protection, they were grace, moving quietly behind the scenes. Think about the moments in your life when something you wanted didn't arrive when you expected, and you felt frustrated or discouraged or forgotten, only to look back later and realize that if it had arrived earlier, you wouldn't have been ready to receive it. Life is always aligning with your readiness. God never rushes you because there is no love in rushing. And God never withholds from you out of cruelty. He withholds only long enough to strengthen the part of you that will need to hold the blessing once it comes. And then there's the longing, that feeling inside you that's been tugging at you for years, maybe your whole life. That longing has never been a mistake. It's never been a weakness. It's been a signal, a pull, a steady voice guiding you towards something larger than the life you've known. Longing is the soul's way of pointing toward your next chapter long before the mind understands what's happening. It's God's way of whispering, keep going, keep moving. There's more for you than what you're settling for. Longing is the invisible thread that has led you through every season, even the ones you didn't fully understand. And I want you to breathe with me for a moment and let this truth settle into your heart, because it dissolves so much self-blame, so much confusion, so much pressure. You were never failing. You were being formed. You were never lost. You were being rerouted. You were never forgotten. You were being prepared. And now that preparation has led you here to this moment, to this message, to this turning point in your life where everything inside you is ready to awaken in a new way. Because when you truly begin to recognize that everything in your past has been guiding you, not punishing you, not testing you, not measuring you, but guiding you, you start to see your life not as a series of struggles you survived, but as a beautifully crafted path that has been leading you toward a deeper relationship with the divine. And this awareness is only the beginning, because once you understand the divine setup behind your life, the meaning within your pain becomes clearer, and the patterns you once feared begin to reveal their purpose in ways that can completely transform how you see your story. Now that we've opened the doorway into this realization that your life has never been random, that every struggle and every delay has been quietly shaping you, I want to take you into a place that many people avoid because they believe it will hurt too much to look at. But what I'm about to share with you can bring more healing, more clarity, and more freedom than anything you've heard in a long time. Because this next truth reaches into the very heart of your story. And here it is. The moments that brought you the most pain weren't there to punish you, they were there to awaken you. While the mind cries out in fear when pain arrives, the soul whispers something else entirely. It whispers, pay attention. Because pain, as uncomfortable as it is, often becomes the doorway through which your deepest transformation enters. When you look back at the chapters of your life that hurt the most, the ones that left you breathless or shaken or unsure how you'd ever stand again, you'll notice something remarkable if you look with gentle eyes instead of wounded ones. Those moments cracked open the shell of the identity you had outgrown. They forced you to stop pretending you were smaller than you really are. They pushed you into a level of honesty you may have avoided. Pain doesn't show up to destroy you. Pain shows up to break the old structure that can no longer hold who you're becoming. It doesn't feel that way in the moment, of course. It feels like everything is falling apart. But the falling apart is often the first step in coming back home to yourself. Think for a moment about the caterpillar inside the cocoon. Before it becomes the butterfly, something dramatic has to happen. The caterpillar must dissolve. Not partially, not symbolically, completely dissolve into a formless state, losing everything familiar. If you looked at that process from the outside, you'd think it was dying. You'd think it was breaking down beyond repair. But what looks like destruction from one angle is transformation from another. The cocoon isn't the end. It's the sacred space where the old self dissolves so the new self can be born. And your life has mirrored this process more than you may realize. When you felt like you were losing everything, when pieces of your identity were falling apart, when old ways of living no longer worked, you weren't being destroyed, you were being transformed. There's a pattern in your pain. And once you begin to see it, your entire life starts to make sense in a way it never has before. Pain has always invited you to look inward, to soften, to surrender, to release control. It has always pointed you toward a deeper truth. It has always asked you to question the stories you've been repeating to yourself. Pain pushes the ego out of the way so the soul can speak. It strips away illusions, reveals what's real, and brings you face to face with parts of yourself you didn't know how to see until everything else fell silent. And when you can see this, when you can look back at the hardest parts of your story and understand that they were not random, not cruel, not meaningless, you begin to reclaim something powerful. You begin to reclaim your strength. You begin to reclaim your resilience. You begin to see that your heart didn't break just to break, it broke to expand. It broke to let in more light than it could hold before. It broke to release what no longer belonged. It broke to guide you toward a version of yourself that pain alone could reveal. You might not have realized it at the time, but every moment of pain softened something hard within you. Every loss opened a deeper compassion. Every disappointment humbled you in ways that allowed you to receive more wisdom. Every heartbreak revealed how deeply you are capable of loving. And every tear watered the soil of who you would become. Pain shaped you, refined you, awakened you, and the fact that you are here, breathing, listening, growing, tells me that the pain didn't win. You did. So when you look back now with clarity instead of confusion, with gratitude instead of resentment, you can see the hidden pattern in your pain. You can see how it led you, not away from God, but toward Him. You can see how it broke open the places where His presence could enter more freely. And you can feel, maybe for the first time, that the deepest parts of your pain were the very places where God held you the closest, even if you didn't recognize it then. And as that awareness settles into your heart, something else begins to rise, an understanding that the people who came into your life and the people who left were all part of this same divine orchestration, guiding you toward who you are becoming. And that is where we're headed next. And now that you've begun to see how your pain was not proof of abandonment, but a gateway into awakening, we can step gently into one of the most misunderstood and emotionally charged parts of the human journey. The people who have walked in and out of your life. This is something that can take years, sometimes lifetimes, to understand. Because when someone leaves, especially someone you love or trust or depend on, the heart naturally interprets that departure as a kind of personal failure. It feels like rejection, like loss, like something precious slipping through your fingers before you had the chance to hold it the way you wanted to. But I want to offer you a different perspective, one filled with more compassion, more truth, and more divine clarity than the stories you may have been telling yourself. Here's the quiet truth that can bring enormous healing when you're ready to receive it. The people who left your life did not leave because you weren't worthy. They left because their role in your journey had been fulfilled. Some people are meant to walk with you for a lifetime, yes, but most are meant to walk with you for a chapter. And just like a book you've loved, each chapter has its own purpose, its own lessons, its own emotional landscape, and its own timing. When that chapter is complete, the story must move forward. Trying to hold on to someone whose role has ended is like refusing to turn the page in a book that is trying to reveal the next part of your life. Some people enter your story as catalysts. They spark something inside you: growth, courage, clarity, healing, self-awareness. Their presence pushes you, challenges you, awakens you in ways you didn't expect. These people may not stay long, but the impact they leave is profound. Others come into your life as protectors. Their presence shields you from choices you weren't ready to face or paths you were never meant to take. Sometimes their departure is the protection, A person leaving can spare you from future pain you didn't know was coming. And then there are the soul teachers, the ones whose presence reveals your shadows, your blind spots, your old wounds. These relationships are often the most painful because they expose the parts of you that are still healing. But even these connections were divinely timed, because without them, you would not have grown into the person you are now. I want you to imagine your life as a long, winding path that stretches far beyond what your eyes can see. Some people walk beside you for a few steps, some for many miles, and some meet you only at a crossroads. But each encounter is intentional. Each presence carries a message. Each departure carries meaning. Think of a teacher in a classroom. The teacher enters your life to help you understand a specific lesson, to guide you through a certain stage of growth. But once you've learned what you needed, the teacher steps back, not because something is wrong, but because something new is ready to unfold. You don't cling to the teacher when the lesson is complete. You carry the lesson with you. And in the same way, you carry the essence of the people who walked with you, even after they've stepped away. I know it can hurt to look back at the people who are no longer here. It can stir up memories, regrets, unanswered questions, and old wounds.